In a small, remote town called Whitehall, the Carter family decided to start a new life. John and Hannah Carter, along with their 5 children, left the city behind and moved into a large, old house on the edge of town, nestled at the edge of a dense, eerie forest. The house was enormous, with cracked walls and broken windows, carrying a strange, haunting beauty that seemed almost alive in its silence. But even before they settled in, the house had an unsettling aura, something heavy and unspoken that weighed on everyone who set foot in it. The townsfolk said the house had once belonged to a wealthy family, one that had vanished suddenly years ago, leaving everything behind as if they had simply ceased to exist. Their belongings, books, and furniture were all left untouched. No one in town knew what had happened to them, and people avoided talking about it, as if the mere mention of the house could bring bad luck. But John and Hannah dismissed these rumors. They wanted a peaceful place away from the city's noise, and the house seemed perfect for their needs. In the first few days, the family started settling in, arranging their belongings, and getting used to the large, maze-like corridors. The children were initially thrilled, exploring every room and corridor, racing down the long hallways. The house was so vast that many rooms seemed abandoned, with dust-covered furniture and cracked windows that allowed only thin slivers of light. Still, something felt wrong. An eerie stillness filled the air, and the silence seemed almost too loud, as though something unseen was watching. Then strange things began to happen. On the first night, Hannah awoke to the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the house. The silence was oppressive, thick with an unexplainable dread. She rose from her bed, her heart pounding, and went into the hallway to check on the children. When she reached her eldest daughter Lucy's room, the door was opened slightly and a cold, unnatural chill filled the air. As Hannah approached Lucy's bed, a wave of dread washed over her. Lucy was asleep, but her face was pale, twisted in what seemed like a terrible nightmare. Her body was tense, her fists clenched as though something invisible was gripping her. As Hannah moved closer, she noticed dark bruises forming on Lucy's arm, marks that looked like fingers, as if an unseen hand had gripped her with brutal force. Hannah didn't tell anyone about this, thinking it might just be a trick of her imagination. But the next night, things took an even darker turn. Her youngest son, Lucas, began talking about whispers he'd been hearing at night. The voice, he said, was soft, and it called his name, as if coaxing him to come closer. The whispers seemed to come from the direction of the basement, a part of the house that none of them had ventured into yet. At first, John and Hannah brushed it off as a child's imagination. But as the nights went on, the whispers grew louder, almost urgent. 5 days into their stay, John noticed something unusual on the outside wall of the basement. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, odd geometric shapes, and ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The wall looked as though it had been clawed at by human hands, as if someone had tried to scratch their way out. But John dismissed it, thinking it was just a quirk of the old, weathered building. Meanwhile, Hannah began to feel an unsettling presence. Every time she looked into the mirror at night, she'd see herself, but then, in the faintest outline, there would be something else, a shadow standing just behind her, something unclear lurking. One evening, as she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, she saw a shape moving behind her. Freezing in terror, she slowly turned around, but there was no one there. The nightmares soon became a regular occurrence, affecting every member of the family. Each of them would wake up drenched in sweat, their minds haunted by images they couldn't remember fully, but that left them shaken and terrified. Then, one night, John awoke to find Lucas standing beside his bed, his eyes wide open but blank, as though he were in a trance. Without blinking, Lucas leaned forward and whispered in a voice that wasn't his own, "They're here in the basement waiting." The family's fear grew as they realized that whatever was in the house was becoming stronger. Deciding they had to confront whatever dark secret lay within, John and Hannah finally ventured down into the basement. The moment they opened the door, a foul smell of decay wafted up, and the darkness below felt dense, as though it were alive. They carefully descended the old, creaking wooden steps, carrying a dim flashlight that barely pierced the thick shadows. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a large, empty room covered in strange markings on the walls. Words written and faded, rusty stains covered every surface, and the air was thick with a sense of malevolence. In the center of the room, a ritual circle had been carved into the floor, as if someone had performed dark rites there long ago. John felt an overwhelming sensation that they were not alone. He raised the flashlight, and in its faint glow, saw distorted faces emerging from the shadows. Spirits, their twisted features frozen in screams of torment, their eyes filled with rage and agony. The figures moved closer, their shapes warping and shifting, their eyes hollow but full of hatred. A chilling cold seeped through John's body as he watched them, his hands trembling with fear. Hannah, too, felt the weight of something pressing against her, cold breaths on the back of her neck. She turned, only to see a grotesque face staring back at her, twisted into a sadistic grin, its eyes gleaming with dark intent. In that moment, both John and Hannah realized the house had claimed them, pulling them into a nightmare they would never escape.
Join our family and be part of our adventures. Just click the subscribe button now.